Ben Franklin hardly qualifies as a hippie. He didn't exactly turn on and drop out, but he did reach a stage in life when he decided to quit working and have more fun.
Franklin is sometimes held up as the archetype of the American capitalist, the self-made man who succeeds in business. And to a certain extent he was, but he was much more than a capitalist. Franklin retired from business at the age of 42. Why? Because he had enough. There were other things he wanted to do with his time.
I shall like to give myself leisure to read, study, make experiments, and converse at large with such ingenious and worthy men as are pleased to honor me with their friendship. Franklin sold his business, keeping a share of the profits to fund his retirement. Then he unleashed his inventive imagination.
Franklin never went anywhere, never did anything without looking around and asking himself, what is going on? Why is this so?
Franklin's questions, and more importantly, his answers, fueled a lifetime of remarkable discoveries. During a transatlantic voyage, Ben becomes curious about anomalies in ocean temperatures and ends up charting what we now know as the Gulf Stream. After calculating the physics of heat radiation and convection currents, Ben designs the most efficient home heating device of the 18th century, the Franklin stove. When Ben becomes fed up changing between reading glasses and distance glasses, he mounts half of each lens in both sides of his frames. He calls the design double spectacles. Today, we call them bifocals. Few inventors can boast such a string of #1 hits. But every now and then, Ben uncorked a complete and utter failure. Most notable, his phonetic alphabet. In Ben's plan, most of the 26 familiar letters are retained. But there are also 6 new letters, among them ing, ish, ed, and eth. This letter to a lady friend is one of the few that Franklin wrote using his phonetic alphabet. Soon after, he dropped the system, much to the relief of those on the receiving end of such messages. While the phonetic alphabet died a quiet, merciful death, another of Franklin's inventions was serenading audiences across Europe. Ben's musical instrument was a new spin on an old trick, rubbing the rims of crystal goblets to create musical tones.
What he did was to say, rather than rub your finger around the rim of 25 glasses, why not have the glasses turn and come to your fingers? And that's exactly what he did with the glass harmonica.
This is Ben's personal harmonica, built during the 1760s and housed today at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. Ben mounted 37 crystal bowls on an iron rod, which was then rotated by a foot pedal.
As the bowls turned in front of him, he would wet his fingers with water, and the friction produced by his fingertips on those bowls made that characteristic sound. Of all the things Franklin invented, this was his very favorite one.
While his harmonica brought him widespread acclaim during his lifetime, it was Franklin's work with electricity that would make him a legend for the ages.
Franklin came to electricity at a time when electricity was not quite a science. It was a curiosity. It was almost, well, often was, a vaudeville act.
After seeing one of these shows, Ben was hooked. He acquired this contraption, known as a Hauksbee generator. Its sole purpose was to create static electricity.
This Hauksbee generator is very similar to the kind of device Franklin used to generate electrical charges. This plastic drum will pick up electrical charges from this pad as I crank it. Those electrons will then be transferred through the brass fingers onto the collection cylinder and then out to the distribution point.
The charge can also be directed along a chain to a pair of metal dishes, where objects like styrofoam peanuts rise and fall in response to the invisible flow of electrons. Franklin performed a similar trick using a small spider made of fabric. Through simple experiments like these, Franklin develops his landmark theory of electricity. He begins with an entirely new terminology.
Battery, plus and minus, charge and discharge. Things we normally use every day. Franklin was the first to use these words in relation to electricity.
Franklin's most important contribution, however, and the one for which he is most known, was to demonstrate that lightning is, in fact, a form of electricity.
This flew directly in the face of the religious concepts at the time of thunderstorms. Lightning and thunder were definitely acts of God, even punishments of God.
Fires started by lightning could decimate entire towns. Single-handedly, Franklin would find a way to prevent these natural calamities.
Franklin devised a theory of electricity, how the particles in the atmosphere jostling around in a thunderstorm would create these charges, just like the ones in the laboratory. But most importantly, he devised a way to test it.
Franklin publishes his theories and a plan for testing them in 1751. In May of 1752, French scientists, following his instructions, are the first to prove conclusively that lightning is indeed nothing more than electricity. In June, before news arrives from France, Ben is ready to conduct his famous kite experiment. The concept seems simple today. A small wire on the kite will draw an electric charge from the clouds. The charge will then travel down a string to a key tied onto the line.
The small electric spark that he got from his kite through the key definitely showed him that lightning really was just the same static electricity he'd been experimenting with on a small scale, except this scale was absolutely enormous.
Within weeks, Franklin unveils his lightning rod, which remains the reliable way to channel a lightning bolt harmlessly into the ground. At the age of 46, Ben had secured his place in history.
There are a number of legacies left over by the Founding Fathers, but one of the most practical ones is the lightning rod created by Benjamin Franklin. Every building, every edifice in the world that stands at some height has one. And one might argue that without the lightning rod, tall buildings might not have come into existence.
Franklin was the one who, well, as people saw or put it, tamed the lightning. He stole the lightning from the heavens. After Franklin's researches in electricity became known, he was one of the most famous people in the Western world.
Though Ben enjoyed the worldwide acclaim, he refused to patent any of his inventions. He didn't earn a dime from the lightning rod or the stove, and that was just the way he wanted it.
He felt that he didn't need any more money, and it was far more important that he could simply contribute to the well-being of society. The lightning rod, in particular, he felt was going to save lots of lives, save lots of homes and buildings from destruction. It was far more important to him that this invention be disseminated broadly than that he, Franklin, should turn a profit from it.
Ben's discoveries and inventions alone would probably have been enough to guarantee his lasting fame. But Ben Franklin's greatest achievement was still on the horizon. Challenging the political order and establishing American independence would become Franklin's most enduring legacy. Before he could raise the flag of rebellion, however, Benjamin Franklin would have to question his loyalty to the Crown of England. In short, he would have to question himself.